Welcome to the Sales Lab from Homebridge Financial, where we discuss the best sales ideas, strategies, and solutions for today's housing market. My name is Anthony Grost, host for today's program. Last month, I attended Shore Consulting's Sales Leadership Summit in Nashville, Tennessee. And one of the key topics discussed at the conference was around planning for an unknown future. The real question that was asked is, are you and your sales team prepared for the next shift in our business or how we do business? Now, while we don't know what the shift will be, there can be many things that will affect our business. For example, just regular market cyclicality, seasonality, technology. There can be industry disruptors or even social change, but we don't know what it's going to be. But what we do know is that we have to plan and also grow ourselves and with our sales team to prepare for this market. So to help us plan for this unknown future, I've invited Jeff Shore to be on our program. For those of you who don't know Jeff is the founder and CEO of Shore Consulting. He's a noted speaker, trainer, author, podcast host, as well as thought leader in the new home sales space. He and his team work with hundreds of builders from across the United States and really are what I consider the premier sales training consultancy in the US. So Jeff, welcome to our program. So happy to have you on.
Anthony, always good to speak with you. It's always a pleasure, and I don't need to tell your audience that Homebridge is my personal lender. So we got that on too.
Well, thank you there. We've been in a really hot market the last few years. We've had the millennials come into the home buying age. We've had historically low interest rates and a great economy. But along the way, we hit some bumps. We hit COVID, that little bug got in the way. We had supply chain issues. We've had a complete shift to online sales. And these are major things salespeople have had to deal with along the way. And now there's early signs also of potential changes in buyer sentiment. So, given that the market will change, we just don't know when, how has the hot market affected or impacted the average salesperson skills? And more importantly, how well prepared are the average salespeople for the next change?
It's a good question. It's actually a very important question for both sales people and sales leaders to be thinking about right now, because the fact is that there are sales skills that we need for different types of markets. And when you look at the last 18 months, it's been the sales skills have been very reactive. I'm not slighting salespeople on this. This is by necessity. We've had to react to what's gone on around us and the changes around us. But what we find here is that some of the skills that have been needed for many, many years have not so much been needed over the last 18 months. I refer to them as dormant sales skills. They're skills that wouldn't be utilized in a normal market or in a decelerating market, but not so much utilized in a really hot market. And so I am concerned that those skills have sort of gone soft, they've gone dormant. And then when you see a market change, how long does it take to ramp back up? It's not like just getting back on a bike if you haven't ridden for a long time. It takes a while, it takes some practice to be able to bring those back up. So it'll be really interesting to kind of see what happens next, as we're, I think, on the front end of a market shift right now, and whether or not sales professionals are really prepared for that.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. When the market is going really well, we tend to relax. And I'm including myself in that as well, that we do see that behavior. Now, one of the things at the summit you talked about is that while we don't know the future, that we have to grow into it. And for our audience who wasn't in attendance, how do you define that growth? When you talk about growing into it, what do you mean?
Yeah. So, when we think about, we have to start with the problem. And part of the problem right now is that our lives, whether we're sales leaders, whether we're frontline salespeople, lenders, whatever it is, our lives are so complex, right? The market has made it so. There's such a volume of work that we've had to deal with from just running a million miles an hour. So we've got all this complexity around us. And the problem here is that growth is, in fact, another form of complexity. Now, there's a difference, though, because the complexity around us causes a specific type of stress that we would call distress, right? It's negative stress. But growth is also stressful. It just happens to fall under the category of eustress or EU stress, good stress, like euphoria, right? So if we can't get rid of or lessen the amount of distress that we have, we don't have room for this new growth, for that eustress to come along. And we really have to do that, because our that growth is what refreshes our brain, and what keeps us sharp. It gives us energy. So all
Mhm.
of the distress that we have to take up through problem solving and dealing with changes and the unknowns and everything else, that robs us of mental energy. But growth
Mhm.
actually gives us mental energy. So if we want to be strong into whatever the next market change is, we have to grow into it, if for no other reason than to try and protect our mindset and keep us mentally fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm sure a lot of people who listen to our program, who follow you, there's a lot of high achievers out there. And
Yeah,
part of the things that we do as high achievers, and I'm throwing myself into this in terms of, we charge into battle. We tend
yeah,
to react quickly rather than slow down. And at the summit, you talked about when we charge in, we miss some crucial planning steps. So, what can sales leaders do to gain clarity or better understand the steps that they need to take here in this process?
yeah. I mean, for sales leaders, the we have to ask ourselves the question: what is the core of what we do? What are the most important things that we do? And again, we get a false read on that when we think about the last 18 months, because the market has really dictated the activities. Right? We have to respond to the activities around us. But if you see a market decelerate, if a market changes, if a market doesn't have to go soft, it just has to sort of flatten out a little bit, then what happens? We have to own our tasks and our priorities, and focus in on what's really going to matter. And so when it comes to sales leadership, my single biggest concern is, just like there are dormant sales skills that we used to use that we haven't had to use so much: follow up, asking for the sale, closing, dealing with incentive driven buyers, all of those things we're going to have to figure out. It's the same thing with sales leaders. There are dormant sales leadership skills. I'm talking about lead conversion coaching, really working with the salesperson on taking every sale as far as it will go, or skill development coaching to say, how can we make you better for the next person who walks through the door? And again, sales leaders have been so busy in a reactive mode over the last year and a half that they haven't had the time to really be proactive in either lead conversion coaching or skill development coaching. And I think part of it is they're looking and saying, A, I don't have time, and B, I don't have the need. Right? We have all the sales we need. Why do I need to coach? And that's an argument that lasts for as long as the market stays white hot. As long until the market backs off, we're going to have a hard time coming to grips with this.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I talk to my sales teams about all the time, is planning and preparing for that change, because when the
Right.
change arrives, that's not the time to start the planning.
That's
You're
correct.
going to lose 30, 60, 90 days in the market. And the
Yep.
goal is to keep going. Now, you talked about complexity in the white hot market.
Yep.
When I'm looking at it, there's so many things the builders are dealing with right now. I'm overrun with sales leads. I have to follow up for these with these buyers. We have supply chain issues. They have very little time to breathe, let alone
Yep.
unfocus. And one of
Right.
the things at the summit that you talked about that I really resonated with me is around complexity. And you said you
Yeah.
can't grow out of complexity. You need
Yeah.
to simplify to multiply. What do you
Right.
mean by that?
Yeah. So, when we think about, I love the term and the mindset of margin. When we think about margin, we think about the space on the edge of the page. When I think about margin in my life, it's the space in my life. It's time margin, where I don't have constantly everything running up against that next appointment, and or mental margin. I have time to rest my brain, right? So
Mhm.
so the complexity that we have adopted is largely based on the fact that we are trying to do so much that we never get any rest, we never get any break from that. And so we can't, as I mentioned earlier, we can't introduce new growth because there's simply no room. But I would challenge this: what are we doing out of tradition rather than out of strategy? So, the industry didn't
Mhm.
change for 50 years. Now COVID comes along and everything changed.
Mhm.
And yet we're still trying to drag 2019 strategies into 2021. We're still trying to do things the same way we did in 2019 in 2021. And we've got to look at it, and we've got to take all of the stuff that we do, the paperwork that we do, the meetings that we attend, everything that gobbles up our attention, right? You have to look at it and say, your attention is like currency, and we pay attention. Well, if you're paying out your currency on all of this dumb stuff that we're doing out of tradition rather than out of strategy, you just got to run out of it. You're not going to have any attention left to pay. So we need to start scuttling things. We have to put everything on trial. We got to look and say, why am I sitting in this meeting? Am I sitting in out of tradition or out of strategy? And the way that we do this is we ask a question, how much effort and how much impact? So I'm taking the things that I do, the processes, the administrative tasks, the projects we're working on, the meetings, everything that takes up time in my life. And I'm saying, how much effort goes into this and how much impact do we get out of that? So as an example, at Shore Consulting, we went through this exercise where we essentially put everything in our company on trial against that test, effort versus impact. And one of the things that we looked at was our podcast. We designed our podcast as a drive time opportunity. It was 30 minutes long because that's the length of the average commute in the United States. Well, guess what happened? COVID comes along. Now people aren't commuting anymore. And sure enough, we saw our podcast numbers drop off. So we looked at it and we said, it takes a lot of effort to put the podcast together. Suddenly we're not getting the impact if we just killed it. And listen, we had a very successful podcast. We were getting 15,000 downloads a month. That's not bad at all. But we looked at it and we said, if we just killed that all, where could we spend our time? So we set it aside and we invented a sales app called Sales 365, which is just like healthy social media right on your phone. It's an app and it's very cool. We're loving it. It's a great time. We never could have done that, which is what we believe where the industry continues to go is more and more towards handhelds. We never could have done that if we were investing our time in something that was costing us more effort than the return we were getting in impact. So that's the advice that I would take all of your practices, put them on trial and ask, this is the effort. Are you getting the impact that exceeds that effort?
Yeah, and that's such good advice, Jeff. You know, it's something I'm doing with my coach. I actually do coaching, and it's simplifying to multiplying and being more effective doing less. And that's really what we're talking about. Now, with different markets, there's different skills. So as a sales leader, if I'm looking at my sales teams, what are some of the different, and I think you called them micro skills, that salespeople will need for the next market? What are some things that we should be, trying to look at or evaluate?
Well, first of all, if you're a sales leader and you've got a sales team, I would take that question to your sales team and ask them the question. When we see a deceleration in the market, when the market shifts down, even if it doesn't have to tank, if it just goes normal for a while, ask your sales team, what skills do you think you're going to need when the market goes south? So start there. Let them take an ownership in that. Let them identify it, because if they identify it, then they're more likely to be able to work on it. To me, the number one skill is determining the customer's motivation and why they're moving in the first place. To me, that should not be a market-dependent skill, but I've had way too many salespeople over the course of the last year and a half say either to me or to their managers who report to me, look, you want me to figure out why they're thinking about moving? I don't care why they're thinking about moving. They want to buy, I want to sell. Why don't we just go there? And I would look at it and say, well, if you're only interested in getting them on paper and getting paid, okay, I guess that attitude will hold up. But if you want to make a difference in their life, you have to know the why. You have to understand their story. So I don't think that skill will ever not be fresh, but it's definitely diminished over the last year and a half. Certainly when we look at closing skills, no question about it. Even the small closes, like, is this the kitchen you were hoping for? Those questions are not getting asked, even in the minor closes along the way. Follow up for certain. But I think the big one is going to be price challenges. We are going to see price challenges here. You're going to see builders, it's already happening, that are introducing incentives. Now that customer is going to come into your door and say, hey, so-and-so's giving away $10,000. What are you giving away? And that's something that has not happened for years. So that's a micro skill that a salesperson has to have down, but it's probably dormant right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I was speaking at a sales meeting yesterday, a builder sales meeting, and that was exactly what they wanted to understand was
Mm.
affordability, because
Yeah,
this is the first year in almost 3 years, 4 years, where we haven't had falling interest rates. So all the
right,
price increases are really hitting payments right now. And I think, you know, to your point, the market isn't going to crash, but it will slow. And
right,
even though a good market can be slower, it's not going to feel right. So having those
right.
skills, I think, is absolutely important. So if I'm a
Just,
sales,
one thing about that, Anthony, just real quick here.
Mhm.
I think as a sales leader, if you've got salespeople reporting to me, you better be monitoring their confidence. You better be looking at it and saying, how confident are you? And you can even ask your sales team to rate the market on a scale of 1 to 10. And if you have salespeople who are saying, I think it's about a 5 or a 6, first of all, they're wrong. If you look at where we were at 2010 and say, hey, how'd you like to have a market like 2021? What would you think? I mean, we'd be looking and saying, I'd call that a 12, a 15 on a scale of 1 to 10, right? So we get a little warped on that. But the key here is that if your confidence in the market drops on behalf of your salespeople, I promise you the next thing that happens is that they're going to transfer that lack of confidence over to the customer. So the confidence level of the salespeople is an early indicator of what's happening in the market in general and what will continue to happen if we don't fix that.
okay, so I was going to ask you about that. So you would, you know, asking, inquiring, questioning our salespeople is a great way to evaluate their mindset,
Yeah,
correct? Okay.
totally. And it's critical because if their mindset goes south, they'll take the customers down with them.
Oh,
Let's look at it this way. Confidence is an adoptable trait. We
mhm.
gravitate towards confidence. We want confidence. You think about business leaders, the captain of the sports team, politicians. We gravitate towards confident people, and confident people have influence over us. We want our salespeople to be confident, not arrogant, but we want them to be confident. So if the confidence of the salesperson drops, watch out. It's going to get adopted by the customer.
Right. So when we talk about mindset variables, things we should
Yeah.
look for in our salespeople, is it just confidence, or are there other variables we should be looking at?
No, I think confidence is way up there, but I think the other one is just positive energy, right? I think that
Mhm.
positive energy is one of those things you can goose it, but you can't teach it. Your salesperson has it or they don't have it. But if you see a salesperson who's coming off the rails, they're worried about the market, they're teenagers being a jerk, whatever it is, and pretty soon the positive energy starts to wane. And it's the same thing. Just like confidence, that energy gets adopted by the customer. And so we've got to make sure that as sales leaders, yeah, there is that motivational aspect of what it is that we do to ensure that those most important factors are there. The other thing that we have to look
Mhm.
at as sales leaders for our sales team is whether or not our salespeople are really allowed to achieve. This is a concern that I have in many markets where salespeople are gapped. They don't have any product to sell right now. The inventory is very, very
Mhm.
low. And you show me a high achieving salesperson who's not allowed to achieve, it's going to drive them a little bit stir crazy. So we've got to find alternatives there to keep them occupied, to keep them mentally challenged until that next community comes along.
Yeah. Have you seen any builders come up with creative ways to keep people
Yeah.
engaged?
In fact, I was just talking to a builder this morning about that, where there's a sales leader who looked at it and said, "Wow, I got several salespeople with no inventory over here, but I've got warranty who is totally overwhelmed." And so they took 3 of their sales team and they trained them on how to do customer orientation and walkthrough tours. And so there's that cross training that goes on. And now they've stepped into the warranty role. They're
Mhm.
obviously being paid for it, but they've stepped into the warranty role temporarily. The thing that's great about it is that it is challenging the salespeople so much to learn so much about the way the home is built, the way the home is presented, the way we take care of the home after the fact. Now those salespeople are going back to the rest of the sales team and saying, "All right, here are 5 things that I never thought I would ever need to know, but man, are they changing the way?" So yes, absolutely, we are. There are departments that are overwhelmed. Let's take the salespeople that are being underutilized right now, plug them into that gap, give them the education,
Mhm.
and fill that temporarily without having to hire, new full-time people. So yes, it is happening, and it's a very effective way to be able to solve two problems at once.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because the knowledge the knowledge is going to give them confidence, which is going to
Yeah,
come
it is.
through in their
That's true.
enthusiasm and confidence
Yeah.
with their sales. So that's really a great thing. I didn't even think of that. That's a really
Yeah.
great,
Yeah.
great,
Really
great,
powerful.
really powerful idea. So we don't know the future. And let's talk about sales leaders. We don't know the future, but we do know that we have to be ready. So we talked about coaching. We talked about
Yeah.
identifying their mindset. But me as a sales leader, what do I need to be developing? Because,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm being very, very honest. I'm looking at
Yeah.
it saying I need to develop some skills too. What should I
That's
be
correct. Yeah.
conscious of or trying to develop?
Yeah, right. So just like there are sales skills that go dormant, there are sales leader skills that also go dormant when they are underutilized. And to me, the at the top of that list are lead conversion coaching and skill development coaching. So lead conversion coaching about working with my sales team to ensure that they're taking every conversation as far as it could possibly go. Sales leaders have simply not had to do that over the last year and a half. So now, just to step in and say, okay, here we go, lead conversion time. Let's talk about your leads. You're gonna have salespeople like, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't do that. You don't ask about my leads. These are my leads. Thank you very much. And so there's going to be we're going to have to fight through that with our own ability to prove to our salespeople that we bring value. This isn't a game of gotcha. I can bring value to help you to be more successful. Same thing with skill development coaching. For me to come alongside of a salesperson and say, okay, we're going to work right now on how we ask our salespeople, this discovery, or how we ask our customer this discovery question, or how we ask for the sale on a close. Let's work on that right now. It hasn't been done for the last year and a half. So once again, you're going to have salespeople who are like, whoa, get out of my kitchen. You don't, I do this. So that those sales skills, they do tend to wane. And I will tell you, Anthony, I'm recovering from rotator cuff surgery, so I didn't play hockey
Mhm.
for 4 months. This last Thursday, I played hockey for the first time. I'm sitting on the bench just as the game starts. When it's time for me to go on the ice, you don't go through a door, you jump over the wall. I jumped over the wall, skate stepped on the ice, bam, slipped on it right in front of the bench. All the guys, I fell flat on my back. It was extremely embarrassing. Why did that happen? I've jumped over the wall literally thousands of times because it's been 4 months since I've done it, and the muscle memory has weakened. Now I jumped back on the ice and was able to figure it all out. I actually had a pretty good game. But the point here is that we can't think that, you know what, time to think about lead conversion again now. Here we go. You got to warm that up. You got to learn that. You got to relearn that and get back into your game. And you need to do it before the market goes south on you. The time to learn the skill is not after the market rescinds.
Yeah, absolutely. It isn't. And I do get people staring at me saying, why are we changing now? And it's not
Yeah,
changing now. It's that we're preparing that we can pivot using the word from the summit
yeah,
where we
yeah,
can
yeah.
pivot quickly in what we're doing. Well, Jeff,
Right.
I can't let you leave today without talking about your new book, Maximize. Can you give us
Yeah,
an insight of that? I'm
sure.
excited to read it.
Yeah, it's a mindset book. It's all about and I wrote it as sort of a scorecard to be able to go through and say, here are 8 things that really cause sales professionals to maximize their opportunities. And I want sales people to read it with that idea of saying, how am I doing here? How am I doing here? How am I doing here? So with each chapter, there's not just the lesson, but there's the questions. And to me, that's the most important part. The introspective questions that ask you to search inside your own soul and see how you're doing. Are you maximizing? The problem we're up against right now is that the market is maximized for us. So if the
Mhm.
market decides it's going to take a little breath over here and pull back, is your head on straight so that you don't lose steam just because the market loses steam? Let me put it another way. If you need a great market to be a great salesperson, what does a bad market make you? What does a mediocre market make you? So we want to make sure that our head is on straight here to be able to get this right.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, thanks for being on our program. Thanks
My
for
pleasure.
sharing your insights and your ideas.
You bet.
For all of us here at the Sales Lab, thanks for listening and make it a great day.